Welcome back then folks to episode 3 of the short 3-episode mini-series representing a full flight gate to gate from Manchester to Rotterdam in the Aerosoft CRJ, the Microsoft Flight Simulator. Little side note before we continue on with the tutorial folks, if you want to get hold of the amazing British AvGeek Osprey liveries that we've been using today, and you see at the intro and outros of all our videos, we've got plenty available all the way up to 747-8s and Dreamliners. Head to our Discord server and they're all exclusively available to download there. Of course, if you've not already checked out episode 1 and 2 for this full flight tutorial, then make sure you do go back and check those out as well before you continue here, and it will make a lot more sense. Episode 3 is going to focus on planning our descent and flying the ILS and landing into Rotterdam. We're flying down the east coast of England at the moment towards the English Channel. We've got lots to consider, lots to plan for, lots to talk about. And to begin with, we're going to have a look at Navigraph. So, dropping those charts, you can see our route here. We're already well over a quarter of the way. And we want to open the charts list for EHRD using Navigraph. And we're going to be using the REDFA to Romeo arrival. And we're going to expect runway 24 because of the weather at the moment. The previous episode I explained to you guys what the latest METAR is. And as a reminder, that is winds are 260 degrees at 12 knots, variable between 230 degrees and 310 degrees. All the nines, so good visibility for us. 22 degrees Celsius, 10 degrees dew point, and QNH 1022. On the charts then, you can see REDFA here. We've got a couple of things to monitor. REDFA's on a radial 90.8 miles away on a radial from the SPY VOR. We're not going to worry about that too much today, although we could in theory tune that if we wanted to, track that radial if we had to. For example, if we were in a classic aircraft that didn't necessarily have the ability to plot waypoints in or do RNAV, then that would be quite handy to know. Flying for 45 miles from REDFA to Massos, and Massos is on a radial of 019 from the Costa VOR 110.05. So we could in theory tune that as well if we wanted to, and there's a hold at Massos if it's busy. And you can see here it says when passing COA radial 019, which is basically where Massos is, we have to be at or below flight level 60 unless otherwise instructed. So really interesting little approach here for us, and we can see in the centre of that red ring there we've got the Rotterdam VOR as well, and we are quite close to Schiphol as well. So in theory, in real life, it'd be very busy airspace that we're flying in and around. Having a look at the ILS charts for runway 24 then, and you can see here, just need to check my speed. You can see here that we've got our approach plates here for the ILS or LOC runway 24 approach. From Massos, you can see that black line there, where we're going to leave Massos on a track of 072 degrees to overfly the Rotterdam VOR, which is ever so slightly northeast of the airfield, and we're going to make sure we've got that tuned in. We're going to brake over that at a track of 086 degrees up to 9.1 DME. We're then going to overfly the Rotterdam NDB RR 405.5 for that frequency down to 2,000 feet by that point, and then turning to intercept our 30 degree ILS intercept, flying our final approach from 2,000 feet at about 9 miles, 9.3 miles for that initial fix. The airfield course, the runway course, runway 24 is 237 degrees. That's going to be really important for us later. And the ILS frequency of 110.9. All the information is also at the top of the plates. So you can see there the LOC is 110.9. Final approach course 237 degrees. Glide slope 4 DME, we should be at 1,315 feet, and the ILS decision height, so MDA is 185, that's the Barrow, or the DH linked to the Radalt is 200 feet. And the airfield, interestingly, is actually below sea level, it's minus 14 feet. We're going to have to tune that. As we did at departure, we had to tune our airfield elevation in case we had to go around and return back to the airfield. The aeroplane knows what to pressurise to, or depressurise to. We need to do the same as we arrive into Rotterdam. We've got our missed approach data as well. So you can see here it says climb on a track 237 degrees to 2000, contact ATC. Comms failure wise, which we would in theory do on Unicom. We'd climb on a track 237 to 2000, then we'd turn ourselves left to the Rotterdam NDB, which is here, 350.5, and we'd then enter a hold or continue off to have a second attempt for the approach. Loads of information, but first, before we tune all of that in, let's tune our arrival in. So into the aeroplane, departure arrivals, we want ILS runway 24, next page, REDFA to Romeo via Massos. Click arrival data and it says there that's what the nav data suggests, so we know that the aircraft's going to tune itself in to 110.9, glide slope angle of 3 degrees, and we've got the lock bearing, which is the course, 237 degrees as well, which we know from the charts that we looked at a second ago is all correct, and the airfield elevation of -15 is correct too. That's awesome. Execute. You can see now from REDFA we've got a continuous line through to our destination. And apparently around about 30 minutes to go, but that's because there's a discontinuity. So in the legs page we've got 2 REDFAs. Delete the first, then delete the discontinuity. Always check your flight plans, guys. Go through, anytime you change anything, check every page, and if you're happy, execute, and then you'll see all of the advisory VNAV and our ETAs complete there. There's our top of descent marker for our advisory VNAV, and that's because we turned that on there, and we've also put in when we hit top of descent, we're going to need to select an altitude to descend down to, and we'll see the snowflake appear on the right of the PFD, and we'll get the ball in this little vertical speed indicator here. And effectively we want to set a vertical speed to align with the ball, because that's what the aeroplane is telling us we need to fly to in order to achieve a descent to meet the constraints that we're setting. Done a little turn, so reset the heading bug there. And we know from looking at the charts we need to be at or below 6,000 by COA 29, which is Massos. That speed's just at the bottom end of that radial there, so 0.5% M1 just to try and hold that speed within the target we've selected there. And we could probably turn wing anti-icing off now from our earlier climb through all the clouds. If we were going to fly into Innsbruck, for example, as we get towards the approach, that circle to land or anything else, we want as much power as possible at high altitudes. We could start the APU and we could change the bleed source to just APU for the air conditioning. That gives us more power for the engines, and also, especially with the 900 and 1000, they tend to have a working coupled VNAV, and if that top of descent marker gets hit and we select another altitude to descend to, inside options on the second page we can click coupled VNAV available, and what that does is it gives us this button here. So we could click that, arm it, and then we could select 5,000 for example, or 6,000. When we hit top of descent, the aeroplane is then going to descend itself. Of course the throttle is always down to us, so we've got to change the throttle, but you can see here, as I mentioned from episode 2, I'm not having to chase the throttle because I've set an N1 that's suitable for the speed I want to achieve at this altitude. We're almost at top of descent, and we've got loads more still to do, so we're going to get the 3,000 ready, the 6,000 feet ready. We need to select the landing elevation there, it's 260. We want to change that. We want that to be as close to -14 as possible, because that's the airport elevation at Rotterdam. So we're going to select -20 feet, so the aeroplane knows what to depressurize to. Almost at top of descent. We can increase the range to see what's going on a bit further away. And the QNH is 1022. Let's have a little look at the checklist as a bit of a reminder. So landing elevation is set, fuel is checked, there, that's more than enough still. TCAS is set, it's showing above and below there. Of course you can turn it on and off using that button. You can go into the settings here as well, and you can change that to just below if you wish to as well. So for descent, naturally you'd have TCAS showing below, but I like to have it all on there because it's quite cool. Landing data is set. We need to do MDA still, and approach briefing complete. The MDA we need to set to 185, so we're going to set that in a second. But first we've got top of descent to contend with. So trying to do a bit of multitasking here. Click that across. 185, and the increments go up by tens. So go higher, 190. If you want to set a DH, we can flick that across, push it, and we can set 200 feet as well. And that should give us our minimums call out. The DH goes up in increments of 1, so it can take a long time, so do bear that in mind. We know we're almost about to hit top of descent, and we will also know because the PFD will have our snowflakes. We've got 6,000 set for our descent. And we're going to assume it's going to want about 1,800 foot per minute roughly. So we're going to go arm vertical speed mode. We want to bring that throttle back and start to pitch the nose down. Do 1,500 to begin with, and then as we pass the top of descent marker on the nav display there, you're going to see quite a few changes. Also in VNAV, for descent, we want a speed of 290, so let's change that. So we target the new speed, and down we go. We've just started our descent into Rotterdam. There's the snowflake, telling us that actually we need to descend more, so let's drop that. There's the ball as well, so that's suggesting about 2,000 foot per minute we need to descend. So we need to reduce the throttle to match that as well, guys. There we go. So that's telling us that we're looking good on the profile because we've got the snowflake there along the centre horizontal line, and the ball is in line with our target of 2,000 foot per minute as well. That's actually looking pretty good. And then try and stabilise the throttle so that you can just descend without having to touch it once you've got it set nicely. Round about there, I think, roughly about 64% N1. Should hold that nicely, and we'll check that as we go. We need to tune some of our nav stuff, so in the radio page we need to select 110.9 for the ILS frequency, and 110.4 for the Rotterdam VOR at the airfield there. Monitoring the speed and our advisory VNAV and our rate of descent all the time. ADFs we can select 350.5 in case we go around, that's the ROT NDB for Rotterdam, and then the R Rotterdam NDB is 404.5. We can add that into ADF2. Bearing, we can click that, and we can select VOR1. And what that will do is when we get into range, it will start to show us the VORs. More so for VOR2 because that's the one that we're actually tracking. And we can, as we get a bit closer, we can arm ADF1. That's going to give us a little flashing light every now and again to show us where we need to go in case of a go around. But for the time being, I'm happy using just FMS1 for that magenta line. Making sure that speed doesn't slip too far above the top end of our target there. We're on VATSIM, so I'm constantly checking VPilot in case we get controllers online. Oh, look at that, that is extremely bright. Wow. That's the sun reflecting off the screen. That is incredible. That's quite something. I've never seen that in the sim before until now. I'm going to cheat a little bit because I am planning a continuous descent all the way down. I'm going to set my standby instrument to 1022 already. Gives me one less thing to do as we get a bit closer. In the CRJ, I'm throwing loads of information here at you guys, so I do apologise. Let's resync the heading bug. Bring our range in a bit more so we can see the route that we're flying now that everything's becoming a bit more compact and closer together. The course knob is something that we're going to have to monitor and check. Now, when we actually start the approach, from looking at our Navigraph charts, you can see that the course was 237 degrees. Now, most aircraft, the Airbus and everything else, will auto-tune and sort that out for us. We don't need to worry about that in those types of aircraft. But in the CRJ, we have to make sure that the course needle is set correctly. And we'll do that a lot later in the flight, because when we get towards that Rotterdam VOR, I'm actually going to go to heading mode and fly this little section here manually, as if we're either being vectored or the nav has broke a little bit and we're just making sure we're flying this nicely ourselves. So I'm going to show you guys how to sort that out, and it's going to involve changing this nav source logo button here so that we go from FMS1 to Lock 1. So that's all looking good. We're into Massos, VNav's looking okay. We're being advised now we need to reduce that speed by about to about 1,800 foot per minute for vertical speed, and of course remembering that just before we punch below 10,000 feet we need to bring our speed off. We'll set 245. I've actually cheated a little bit and I've set our baro pressure to 1022 on our standby instruments. It just gives us one less thing to worry about, and 245's done there. Trying to think what else we need to do, and all of this in our descent checklist is complete really. So before landing checklist, flight attendant advised, that will happen shortly, and automatically, as will passenger signs because we've got those on auto. Thrust reversers armed, landing gear down, slats, flaps. We're going to go full flaps for landing. It's a really short runway, but we will deal with those in a second. In the performance page then, our VREF is 134. We add 5 to that for approach speed, so we want 139 knots. Don't forget we've got to manage that manually ourselves. Let's kill that rate of descent a little bit so that we sort our speed out, and we want all of the lights on as required for our descent. If we're going to fly through cloud or icing conditions, by the way folks, it's really important that we turn the wing icing on, but also the cowl icing. But make sure, if you're going to need power, you turn the cowl icing off, because you will find that those two there, you will lose about 10% N1 for that. Almost at Massos, about 50 track miles left to go, 40 miles to the airfield, and we can see land ahead. We're on 122.8. Rotterdam traffic Osprey 165, inbound REDFA 2 Romeo arrival expecting ILS runway 24, passing Massos 6,000 feet, well advised. next when over the airfield, Rotterdam traffic. Keeping an eye on the speed there, don't let it bleed off. There we go, we restabilise that. And using the bearing left and right there, I've actually gone ahead and I've selected VOR FMS1. As we get a bit closer, I'll select ADF1, so we're actually tracking that Rotterdam NDB in case of a go around. And you can see here that I've selected VOR2, which is the Rotterdam VOR that we're going to be tracking. Altitude capture now as we pass Massos at or below 6,000. We're going to be exactly at 6,000 at that point. If we want to continue a descent further, don't forget to keep an eye on your speed. So my rule is, if I see it dropping below the bottom end of that range, I'm flying too slow. So be aggressive and get that speed back to the centre. There we go, 6,000. Turning any second. Rotterdam looks fantastic actually. Hopefully there's some good scenery. It is Asobo handcrafted. We've got our MDA set. We could set a DH if we wanted to. And now let's set 3,000. Which is our next target. Vertical speed. Don't forget, bring the throttle back with the descent. This is where the advisory VNAV might go a little bit funky because we don't necessarily need to start descending yet. Watching that speed in the turn, especially as I killed the rate of descent there. There we go, what about minus 500 foot per minute there for us for the descent. See that banana moving there as well. There we are, that's looking pretty good actually. So we'll be at 3,000 bang on the runway, or the VOR. We can see that the advisory VNAV's got it perfectly on the centre line of that horizontal bit there of the VNAV advisory guidance, and the ball is suggesting probably minus 300, well basically minus 400 foot per minute rate of descent, and that's what we're achieving, so that's fine. Probably come back on that throttle half and N1 if we can. There we go. And Rotterdam inbound. Don't forget, resync the heading bug. So lights are all off, lights are all on as required. Signs and everything are on auto. Don't need to worry about anything else. Cabin pressure is set. Thrust reversers, we can arm those as long as they're done before you actually start to fly the approach. You're fine. Just bear in mind that if they're armed, you can actually activate them. You don't want to do that in the air. And we bring that range in as well. Go through our final checks just to make sure everything is tuned in as it should. 110.9 for the ILS, so we know that's good. It's actually double tuned that, so 110.4. Retune that one for the VOR, and that's now resynced that one there, so that's why that disappeared. It's auto-tuned itself to nav 1 and 2. So if you see that the blue VOR needle has disappeared, that's highly likely why. It's auto-tuned itself on nav 1 and 2 for the ILS. But hey, that's not a bad thing. Reaching the coast. Looking right ahead, we can see the approach lights to runway 06. Right up here, just where the cursor is. We're watching the speed, we're watching our rate of descent the whole way through. And there's nothing else for us to do except for establish onto the localizer, set the gear and the slats and flaps, and that's it. What would probably be sensible now is for us to start to think about slowing the aeroplane down a bit more. So let's set 220 and bring that throttle back ever so slightly. That looks pretty awesome. Look at that. The little C chord there suggests we're almost at altitude capture, and we're at our transition altitude. So Barrow 1022 is what we want. There we go. 1022, 1022. We've got 220 set for speed. If we slow down much more, we're going to want to select flaps and things. The nose is already up at about 3 degrees at the moment, so that's something to watch. This is quite incredible actually for scenery. That's quite nice. You'll find that when you're in the Airbus A320neo, you've got time to look out the window, but in this, you do actually end up struggling to enjoy the environment around you because you're focused on all of the stuff that you've got to do. It's a very busy aeroplane in comparison. So 10 miles to go until the Rotterdam VOR and the airfield. There's the airport. Of course, if we had ATC on, we might be given vectors well before this. That's the importance of resyncing that heading bug all the time, so that we make sure if we have to go to heading mode, we're not going to start turning, it's going to fly us in a straight line until we make another additional input. So that's really important. ADF1 is that magenta line, that's telling us where to go to get to the Rotterdam ROTNDB for a go around for a hold. Not that we're expecting to do so, but that is the missed approach information that we need, so it's important that we follow those. 180, we'll go flaps 8. I'm going to work to hold 180-ish. Bring that range in. So we're now got a maximum 10-mile range. If we want to, we can go to fix and we can type in RTM. This is going to draw a line around the airfield. RTM, a beam RTM, 10 miles. Distance cross, so there's a big green halo around the centre of that VOR, and that is going to give us an idea of where we need to make sure that we're turning by for our final and our base turns. So watch that speed. You take an eye on it to look at something else for just a few seconds, and it does run away a little bit, so you can aggressively fight to get that back. Now I'm going to take over, so resync the heading bug, now go to heading mode, heading, and we know now we want to go continue a descent down to 2000 in a second, so we're going to get that ready. Speed. Does look very scenic, I've got to say. We're over the VOR, so let's get that turn in. The Charts say 086, so let's set that as a heading. Stunning. Never been to Rotterdam. And we're going to fly this for 9.1 miles. And we're going to fly a base leg. Now my little rule here is, as long as my speed doesn't go above T, doesn't go below the bottom end of this gate here, I'm happy for this. Now we're on heading mode, so nav source, let's change that to lock 1, and you can see course 237. If that doesn't match the charts, in this case it does perfectly, but if it doesn't, we need to change course 1 up here to make sure that the course on the PFD displays the correct figure. So if for example, if it said 242, we'd need to change that back. So 2000 vertical speed. Let's continue a descent down now to our final approach altitude. I'm going to keep 180 knots until we are about to establish, basically, and then I'll configure for the rest. Looks extraordinary. So we've already done thrust reversers armed. We've started deploying the flaps. We need to do the landing gear shortly. There's the edge of our 10-mile ring that we just quickly put around the airfield. Very quickly showed you guys how to do that. Or from the VOR, I should say. $2,400. The runway length here at Rotterdam is only 2,200 meters. So we're going to use reverse thrust and manual brakes. We're going to try and vacate a Victor 3 on the charts, which is very quickly to show you guys that. For now I need my approach plates up ready, so I've selected those. We're levelling off at 2,000, so it's important we adjust the speed accordingly for that. And I'm going to go ahead and put in another stage of flaps. Bring up range in a bit more so we can see more accurately what we are going to be doing. Speed, speed, speed. Obviously, as you add more flaps in, it becomes necessary for us to make sure, as we turn, it's a very short bit of downwind, if you like, to that Rotterdam RR NDB. We've got to make sure that we are flying this and being aggressive with keeping our speed. So from RR, from what it looked like on the charts, I want a nice smooth gentle turn to then come around and align with this little stick figure line coming out here. Speed again. We're going to stay on heading mode all the way through to approach. So RR. Continue a nice turn round. Trying to vector ourselves on so we actually come across this little section here, join it nicely, because that is effectively, from what I can tell, is giving us our 30-degree ILS intercept quite nicely there. There's our 10-mile fixed ring spinning away. There's a lot going on this aeroplane, I've got to say. But it's by far my favourite one. Double check the thrust reversers are both armed. Go.
Rotterdam traffic, Transavia 1 November, taxiing to runway 24.
There's an aeroplane taxiing. Hopefully you heard my previous instructions. We can change the format range to this now. We're prepared to intercept the ILS. The second we see that green needle move, we go to want to change, activate approach mode. What we can do now is if we want to, performance, VREF set, 134, add the 5, 139. And I'm just going to let that speed gently come down. Not in a rush to decelerate though. We've still got a bit of a way to go. Moving, approach. Go for another stage of flaps here now, so flaps 30. I'm going to try and hold about 165. Rotterdam traffic Osprey 165, established ILS, runway 24, 9 miles. Heading bug, resync. It's given us a bit of a crosswind, so I'm not quite sure what to expect with this one. It's going to be interesting whether it kicks the rudder out or not as we deactivate the autopilot, so hopefully not. And there's the runway. Almost at glide slope. Glide slope's armed, white on the right hand side of the PFD there, GS. When it's active it will go green and we'll get the updates on the PFD. And we'll go gear down now, about 8 miles to go really. Just before we capture, I'm going to go full flaps. There we go. Watching the PFD then. Glide slope. And the aeroplane's now working to capture and fly that glide slope for us. Happy days. We're all ready to go. Nothing else left for us to do. So that is our before landing checklist all complete. Main thing now, monitor everything, monitor the speed and get yourself comfy to take over. Try not to get distracted by all of the memos.
Traffic, Transavia 1 November is holding short, runway 24.
It's nice. Letting that speed drop a bit, so aggressive, get that back, 139. We don't want to go below that. There we go. Of course, if you wanted to, you could click that there and get the heads up display out as well. 3 down, gear down, 3 green locked. All flaps, speed, speed, speed. We're going. And when we take over manually, the best friend here is trim. So I've got it scheduled into my top hat, a little up down, to trim accordingly. I have control. It's my aeroplane. It's been my throttle the whole time, but everything else has been managed for me. Bit of a crosswind according to the nav display. I'm just trimming to try and keep that nose a nice attitude as we fly the approach. And it means that I don't have to make constant adjustments on the stick. I've actually let go of my stick now, for example, and the aeroplane's settling itself with trim accordingly. Except for that little wiggle there. 500. So I have to correct that with a bit of right stick. Losing the glide slope ever so slightly.
400.
But by this point, I'm looking at the threshold of the runway. And I'm gauging that now. Checking the speed every now and again.
200. 100. 50. 40. 30.
Idle.
20.
Flare.
10.
Touchdown.
Rotterdam
Reverse.
traffic, Transavia 1 November is lining up runway 24.
That's the nose wheel down. And a bit of manual brakes to try and help this guy out. 60 knots. Out of 40, and we'll vacate. Rotterdam traffic, Osprey 165, vacating at Victor 3, taxi to gates.
And Transavia 1 November is taking off runway 24.
So, have a good flight. Approach.
Thank you very much.
Get rid of that.
Bye bye.
Bring the flaps up, and we can disarm the thrust reversers. Strobes. Landing lights off, wing inspection off. APU 1, 2, 3. That's that valve opening there, look folks. And APU start. We can go transponder onto standby. And that is it. And probe heat off. We taxi to the gates. What we can do, CRJ pilot in real life told me they shut down an engine. Got the APU on, we can taxi on 1. Clear the master caution, we know why that's gone off. We can get rid of the flight director. Pop the nav source back onto FMS1 for the next journey. This actually looks pretty cool. It's got to have been someone like Gaia or someone that's created this scenery. This is pretty nice. Especially for a tiny little airfield. And we'll park up at Charlie 1. So, just before we turn to stand, recognition lights off. Strange glitch in the matrix there. Stop line. Oh, I can brake on. And unlock the second throttle for engine 1. and click it down to fuel shut off. And it all goes bad at us. Beacon light can come off, nav and logo can stay on, we've got the APU on as well of course. Aircraft. So we can go chocks on, passenger door open. We can, if we want to, add the power carts, ground cart and things as well. So if you want to shut down the aeroplane, you could turn those on and eventually then turn the APU off. So there we go, 3 episodes showing you guys gate to gate how to get the most out of and enjoy the Aerosoft CRJ series for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Of course, bear in mind, as I mentioned at the start of the videos, that if you have the 900 or 1000 stretch versions, the add-on pack that they've released, then you're going to want to bear in mind that it's a longer aeroplane, it's heavier, your V-speeds are going to be greater, and also there's going to be a bit of a different inertia, so the aeroplane's response to your control inputs are going to be ever so slightly different as well. I hope you've enjoyed the videos. Give us a thumbs up if you have. Make sure you hit subscribe down below. Check out my live stream schedule and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. In the meantime though guys, as always, thank you very much to our bronze, silver and gold frequent flyers and all of our subscribers and supporters across the channel, and I hope to see you all in a live stream in the very near future. Thanks for watching.